Transporting an electric vehicle is very similar to transporting a ICE vehicle. Some of the equipment that is used definitely should be different, meaning that there are specific soft straps, or what we call material straps, that you
Mhm.
can hook up to a Tesla to reduce the chances of anything taking place. The soft straps, they won't conduct any electricity if potentially the vehicle is damaged, or you um, were concerned of that. It also I mean, the training is critical. One, I think it just allows you to, it gives you knowledge on, what should I do? What are the best practices? What is it that I need to do when I arrive on scene? What should I do when the vehicle comes back to our facility? It just educates you to have a better understanding when you handle this product,
Mhm.
that you're doing it in a safe manner. And the ARA's done a fantastic job in developing the courses. I highly recommend that operators that are around or handling these vehicles take the course. Right now, I believe that there's a bit of a partnership with ICBC where they are
Absolutely.
covering the cost for any operator that wants to take this course, which
Mhm.
is a good thing. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the towing companies, the owners, overall responsibility to ensure that their employees can handle these vehicles. And at the end of the day, the employee has the responsibility as well to keep himself safe, whether that's working on the side of the road, or doing a recovery, or whatever the case may be. There's some onus on them to make sure that they educate themselves in the
Yeah.
practices that are adhered to today.
Hello and welcome to EVfriendly. And this is the podcast for you if you're interested in engaging conversations about electric vehicles. On today's episode, we'll be talking with Mitchell Martin. Mitchell is the owner of Mitchell's Towing in West Vancouver. Mitchell holds a level 8 and 9 WreckMaster, and he has over 20 years of experience in the towing and recovery industry. He has served on the ARA Board of Directors for the last 5 years, and he's currently serving on the BBB, Better Business Bureau Board of Directors as well. Uh, Mitchell lives in North Vancouver with his wife, Nicole, and his 3 boys. Mitchell, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ken. Thank you for
Right.
the warm introduction.
All right. Why don't we begin? I know the towing industry is already very familiar with you, but to the rest of our audience, tell us just a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in towing and recovery, and sort of what led you to here.
Initially, I was an automotive technician, and I was taking the course through Vancouver Community College. And I just needed to make extra money. I was living by myself, and just trying to make ends meet. And while I was taking the apprenticeship program, I just needed to make some additional income. So I ended up having a vehicle delivered to my house, and that I was staying at the time, and just got chatting with one of the operators of one of the local companies. And that's kind of how it began. I just went down and applied for a position, and then started working, or started operating a tow truck part-time in the nighttime. And very quickly, I fell in love with it. Being a single guy at the time, and just having a lot of time, and understanding that it was commission based. The more I worked, the more income I could make. So very quickly, I fell in love with towing, and the work that is involved around it, and that's sort of how I got into towing initially.
Hmm. And then when did you open up Mitchell's Towing then?
So I worked for two different companies. I worked in Vancouver, and then I worked on the North Shore. And after about 8 years of working as an owner operator, I decided to take the chance to start my own business. It was around 2008-9 that I chose to make this decision. It was kind of scary because that's when we were having a bit of a recession.
Hmm.
But I felt with the skill set that I had developed, that I could make a solid go of it. So that's when I chose to branch off and start Mitchell's Towing on the North Shore.
Oh. So, do you recall the first time you ever encountered an electric vehicle on a call? And um, I mean, what was your experience of it? Was this something foreign to you, or did you already think you already had the necessary skills to deal with it, or what was that experience?
Our first experience was with Tesla. I mean, at the time, it was a brand new product. It was roughly around 2010, 2011. We had signed up to become a partner with Tesla, and we were helping them, around North and West Vancouver and some other areas in the Lower Mainland. At that time, I believe the Roadster was one of the first vehicles that they started to make,
That's
and
right,
and
it
I think
was.
there was
Yeah.
about maybe 300 to 400 of them that were made, and we had a few that were in West Vancouver, and I remember just having to our business to transport them. There were some issues at the time, well, whether it was with software or whatever. So we towed a few of the Roadsters, and the vehicle itself looks like a regular car, or a
Hmm.
regular vehicle. We were just interested in working with Tesla. It was an interesting experience, but ultimately, in that particular case, using a wrecker, the way we towed that vehicle was very similar to other vehicles.
Hmm.
But I do remember, the first few Roadsters that we relocated for sure.
Yeah. So there's been exponential growth in BC with electric vehicles. The provincial government and federal governments have hit mandates now for 2035. 100% of all sales will be EVs. I imagine where you are in West Vancouver, there's a lot of Teslas. At least I see when I go over there. On a daily basis, how many EVs in general would you have in your storage yard, or do you tow in a particular day?
Well, I mean, we can't predict how many vehicles are going to break down at any given point in time, but yeah, I mean, North and West Vancouver for sure has a lot of Teslas. I can't sort of speculate on how many, but I would say when we're driving down the highway, it's very common to see two or three around you at all points in time.
Hmm.
I mean, it is so popular in an area that Park Royal Mall has a sales center directly in the mall, so
Right.
yeah, it's very popular. Regarding our facility, I mean, if we're talking specifically Teslas, I mean, we can have 3 to 5, on average per day.
Right.
If it's EV vehicles in general, I mean, sometimes we can have 20. It
Right.
just depends on, what's happening at that point in time.
We are seeing them all around. I think we're seeing them in pockets really emerging in Vancouver, West Vancouver. The island's Salt Spring Island apparently is a real hot spot for electric, which is you might think is surprising. I don't know how many chargers they have on that island, but maybe one, maybe they share
E-
communal. And certainly much less if you go up north or in some parts of the interior. They're still, still very very rare. Now you had a really interesting experience now with a Tesla, which had caught fire. I don't think on your yard. Do you want to go into that? It was a featured article in the Tow Canada magazine. It was actually in two parts. So if you want to get a real in-depth view, pick up a copy of Tow Canada magazine and read parts one and two. Why don't you go elaborate on that? What happened and what was the experience from that?
Yeah, so I would say, with any given area, I mean, there's motor vehicle accidents that happen daily, and we have quite a bit of experience now with Tesla. I mean, again, being very popular, a lot of these accidents are driver error, so hitting poles or driving into things, or maybe kissing each other at an intersection. But what was different with this particular Tesla was the gentleman was driving it, and he stopped at an intersection, and smoke just began to build up inside his vehicle. And I'm not aware of any other cases around Canada where this has happened before.
Hmm.
And while the gentleman was sitting at the light, the smoke began to fill his vehicle, and it was more and more and more, and he began to panic.
That's got to be scary.
Yeah, yeah, well, not being able to breathe, and just, I mean, if you ever been around an electric vehicle fire or a vehicle fire itself, the fumes are quite potent. So
Hmm.
it's hard to breathe. While the gentleman was sitting there and the smoke was filling his vehicle, he began to panic, and instead of pulling the release, which is on the driver's side door, where you actually pull up on the handle itself,
Hmm.
that will manually open the door instead of pushing a button. He kicked out the window and then got out of the vehicle. When he got out of the vehicle, it continued to burn, and essentially the interior of the car caught fire and was totally destroyed. So it wasn't a battery fire after an impact. What it was actually was just it spontaneously caught fire in the middle of the road.
Interesting, interesting. Now you had interest, of course, from I think from Transport Canada and from Tesla itself. Didn't they even fly somebody up from Tesla?
Yeah, so the initial part was, going through the EV courses and taking the training. We gave it the approximate space
Hmm.
that it required at our facility. Because the interior was burnt, the battery wasn't discharged. Essentially, it was on touch, so there still could be a potential fire hazard there, or a charge itself. So we stored the vehicle in our facility as we should, and Transport Canada hadn't had very many experiences with this as well, so they were quite interested. And being where the vehicle caught fire from the inside, Tesla also had a direct interest in this particular vehicle. So Transport Canada came down. They documented their experience, and we basically opened the hood with a forklift and disconnected the 12-volt battery. From there, they documented, what their processes should be or their recommended processes to share with the rest of Transport Canada across Canada,
Hmm.
the different branches that are in each province. So since then, they've actually come back and made a few changes, a few minor changes, but ultimately, yeah, it was sort of a high priority case for Tesla as well.
For sure.
They sent up a tech, and it was interesting to see what Tesla had done, and sort of the processes and procedures that their specific employees followed when
Right.
handling this particular vehicle.
This is fairly new. Generally, when these things happen, of course, they hit the press, and anyone with an inclination who is anti-EV is going to really jump on these. Now, we should say that EVs don't catch on fire any more than internal combustion engines do, right? But it's somewhat the nature of the fire that's a lot different with these, and which makes them a lot more scary and unpredictable. And that's a phenomenon called thermal runaway. And you know what that is, but for our audience that maybe doesn't, simply what that is a typical battery is composed of hundreds of these little cells that are like your typical Duracell battery.
Hmm.
And there could just be one or two of those that have become compromised. And you may not even be aware of it, but there's an internal fire spreading in there. And it's kind of similar to a compost. A compost of spark can be really hidden and everything looks fine, but it's smoldering, and sometimes it can take days for that. Um, and so when fire does erupt, it's not like a gas fire that you can just douse it and it's over with. It can be up to 24, 48 hours that flames then can erupt again without you knowing about it. In fact, there was a case and it was on a towing storage facility. The Tesla, it caught on fire. They put it out, brought it back to the storage yard, put it out again. 30 days later, if you can believe, erupted again.
Hmm.
And that's very concerning. Now that has really caught the attention of a lot of people, including our own provincial WorkSafe BC, um, and some of the insurance companies as well. So what does that complicates things? Because as you know, some of the guidelines are it needs its space. If you bring that Tesla or that EV back into your yard, you just can't park it and with the normal, you have to give it ample space. That's obviously very difficult, as you know, when your yard is crammed and just the sheer cost of property these days.
Hmm.
What does the towing industry, how can we combat this? What do we need to do?
Well, just to add some comments, just regarding the ICE vehicles or internal combustion vehicles, when we compare EVs to ICE vehicles, I can share with you that, there's far more ICE fires than there are EV fires at this point. Right now, we have four vehicles in our facility that are internal combustion engines that caught fire. One was at a parking lot just yesterday at
Mm.
Hollyburn Country Club in West Vancouver, and it was a BMW vehicle sitting idle, and it spontaneously caught fire.
Hmm.
So there are quite a few vehicles that catch fire that are internal combustion engines. Now, generally they don't make the news just because it's just an average everyday occurrence. Obviously, as you mentioned, with the Teslas or EV vehicles, um, the severity of the fire is quite enhanced because of the thermal runaway and sort of the power that's built up in that cell, those cells. For us in a towing industry, I mean, being on the North Shore land is very expensive. It's for us, we've been going up instead of out, and that's the only way that we can sort of try and maintain and or control costs. When we bring a vehicle and specifically an e-vehicle back to our facility, essentially, all we can do is give it that space. So we have to have space available 24/7, 365 for when these occurrences take place. Recently ICBC has come out with compensating towing companies for three vehicle spaces.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's better than nothing currently, but I feel that it does require more space. I don't, I'm not aware of any other towing companies that have had an EV other than the one that happened in Sacramento, I guess,
Right.
where it caught fire, where a vehicle's been stored and then caught fire again. Um, the For some vehicle ice fires that we've had happen at our facility, we've brought a vehicle in, it sat for a period of time, and then it reignited at a later
Yeah,
time.
it did.
Usually, it has damaged the vehicles that are surrounding it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's definitely a concern. I think again, the three spaces are better than nothing. There are other ways that we could sort of isolate that particular vehicle, such as a
Hmm.
concrete barricade.
Hmm.
There's a new product out for the fire blankets that you
Right.
can put over the top of Teslas or any other EV vehicle,
Yeah.
which essentially smothers it or doesn't allow
They're
oxygen in.
quite quite amazing. They just blanket over, and it just because these are intense hot fires, and
Yes.
that can put it out in seconds. I think in 30
Yeah, and
seconds it puts
essentially it
it out.
starves it of oxygen and basically, contains it. Now, those we've had various different discussions with different manufacturers, and
Hmm.
you can get a single-use blanket, and I believe it's around 24, $2,500
For
uh,
one for
for
one use.
for
Yeah.
one use, yeah. And or you could potentially buy one that's a multiple use,
Hmm.
and those are $4,000 to $5,000.
Yeah.
So with in the area that we live in, again, raining, quite heavily in the wintertime, we're not sure, or there's no literature on whether or not when you put this blanket over a stored Tesla and it's raining and it's
Right.
for X amount of days, what is the proper procedure? Once the vehicle's towed out, do you have to hang it up? Does it have to be completely dry? So there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered
Right.
before you can enact or use that product.
Hmm.
The concrete barricade, roughly when we priced it out, was around $10,000, and that's to set up this sort of barricade. But it takes quite a bit of square footage to do that, and in areas where like Vancouver and North and West Vancouver, where the cost of land, or even Victoria, where the cost of land is quite high, um, there's a very heavy cost with that. And I mean, if you're storing four or five or six Teslas, it's just it's impossible to provide that sort of space. So
It is becoming a problem, and that's just with the amount of Teslas we have now, or the amount of EVs. And it's just we should make notice, not just Teslas that have this problem. All
mhm.
EVs have this problem and stuff. But could you imagine then when all your yard is electric vehicles, the potential for fire is going to increase. So we really have to get a handle on it and do something. I think do something about this for sure. Should also be noted too is that you're right. Internal combustion engines um, probably are. catch fire more. It's 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 amazing how safe electric vehicles are. In fact, to test them, they drop them from 50 feet up and hoist them up with a crane and drop them down on concrete just to see what happens. Amazing resilience and stuff. Um, but there are guidelines that a tower can adopt to, and I think the important thing is the operator uh, be able to conduct that assessment. And we need to demystify them as well because we don't want towing operators scared of these vehicles.
Hmm.
And I think it comes down to awareness, but also comes down to training. So I know you've had separate training through your partnership with Tesla. You're also EV-friendly certified as well, and you've had yourself and your employees go through that. Um, what is your message? What is actually the importance of completing training and having your operators trained in this?
Well, you definitely touch on it. I mean,
Hmm.
it's to get rid of that mystery behind it. Transporting an electric vehicle is very similar to transporting a ICE vehicle. Some of the equipment that is used definitely should be different, meaning that there are specific soft straps or what we call material straps that you
Hmm.
can hook up to a Tesla to reduce the chances of anything taking place. The soft straps, they won't conduct any electricity if potentially the vehicle is damaged or you um, were concerned of that. It also I mean, the training is critical. One, I think it just allows you to, it gives you knowledge on, what should I do? What are the best practices? What is it that I need to do when I arrive on scene? What should I do when the vehicle comes back to our facility? It just educates you to have a better understanding when you handle this product,
Hmm.
that you're doing it in a safe manner. And the ARA's done a fantastic job in developing the courses. I highly recommend that operators that are around or handling these vehicles take the course. Right now, I believe that there's a bit of a partnership with ICBC where they are
Absolutely.
covering the cost for any operator that wants to take this course, which
Hmm.
is a good thing. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the towing companies, the owners, overall responsibility to ensure that their employees can handle these vehicles. And at the end of the day, the employee has the responsibility as well to keep himself safe, whether that's working on the side of the road or doing a recovery or whatever the case may be. There's some onus on them to make sure that they educate themselves in the
Yeah.
practices that are adhered to today.
Does this need to become a compliance issue or a regulated issue? Or are you more encouraged that just on a voluntary basis, that companies will come forward because they recognize the need for training and to keep their operators safe? Or do we need to come along and have a certification or a compliance for this? What are your thoughts?
On a personal level, I think any enforcement is generally looked upon as negative. I mean, if you force someone into taking something, then they're not gonna, most people don't want to do it. They just, because you're told me to, I guess I'll do it. But ultimately, I think, as an employer, it's my responsibility to sort of bait and hook them and an employee. But I also want to make sure that our guys are safe and they feel confident when they're handling a
Mhm.
product. So for us, any new hires, we require them to take it. For some of the long-term guys that we've had throughout our business, we've tied it to increases um, in money. So they'll get a raise or they'll get something in addition to what they have now to educate themselves.
Mhm.
Ultimately, when the employee is making more money or is handling a product in a confident and safe manner, that reflects on the business. So it is a win-win. It's key to educating and making sure that your operators can maintain and sort of have an understanding of what they need to do when the
Mhm.
situation arises. When we provide service for Tesla. There's various different models over various different years, and the processes have changed from year to year, whether that's jump starting at 12 volts battery in the Tesla to sort of open up the systems or to allow it to awake. So when an operator is new and he arrives on scene and he's trying to provide that service and he's sort of stumbling around and doesn't have a clear idea of what he's doing, it shows the client that or
Mhm.
portrays to the client that he's uneducated or he's not
Right.
familiar. In turn, that client may feel that this person is not qualified enough to
Mhm.
handle their $100,000 Tesla, and that's something like a 3 Series. When you get into like a Model X or even a Roadster now,
Mhm.
we're talking a $200,000 car.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess from my perspective, I want my guys to be confident. I want my guys to be educated in the product. So therefore, we try and share as much literature as possible with them. So
Mhm.
when they arrive on scene, they have that attitude with the client. And no worries, we'll take care of it. We'll make sure that your concerns are addressed. And most times, clients are curious to what we're doing or how we're
Mhm.
handling it, so they'll want to sort of look over your shoulder and watch you as you perform your duties. So
Definitely.
yeah, I
And
think it's
you wanna know as much or if not more than the client that you're serving as well, if you
yes,
don't wanna be
yes,
asking the customer, for
yes,
sure.
exactly. Yeah.
Now Tesla does have a unique model and a unique business model. You mentioned that you have a partnership with Tesla. I don't think it's like a certification, but it is a partnership. Do you see that as the model moving forward, that other manufacturers, Ford or GM, will be directly partnering with tow companies?
Yeah, I mean it's very similar. So Tesla is very similar to let's say GM or potentially Mercedes or BMW even.
Mhm.
When you work for them or you're a provider for them, they share the literature and their updates with you. Much like Ferrari, as an example, with Allstate, they've recently had an electric Ferrari, and so some of the processes that they have are actually night and day from Tesla. So they
Mhm.
recommend not jump starting it, not doing this process. And without having the opportunity to view that literature, you would never know. So when you become a business partner or you provide roadside assistance for these particular manufacturers, yeah, they open the doors, they share the information, and they allow you as a provider to get access to that information.
Yeah.
I think as towing becomes more specialized,
Mhm.
um, the we have an opportunity to sort of dive in and become partners with the manufacturers.
Mhm.
We've been working for Tesla essentially since their conception. And so over the years, as I mentioned earlier, the processes and procedures have changed. So what's right today may be wrong tomorrow, but by being a provider with them, it gives us the opportunity to have those advantages to get
And they
access to that.
can and they can change overnight. So it was an interest when I was at your yard, um, and I think it was a software update that
Yes.
happened overnight
Yeah.
and completely changed the procedure. And we're actually going to see more and more and more of that. So instead of you actually physically having to bring a vehicle in to get service, it's just as you sleep, the software is going to update and change that. But then it's a matter of you being informed and your operators being informed of that.
Hmm.
I see that as how technology is going to drastically impact how you do business and how
Hmm.
you can conduct business. Is Tesla usually pretty good when they do those software updates of notifying you or
Yeah, I mean, it's not a common occurrence where, a procedure changes that quickly.
Mhm,
But yes, we were at Taylor Automotive doing some work for with Tesla, and we were loading a vehicle. And when they had done a software update the night before, it had changed how to put the vehicle into neutral, and which it was a subtle change, but it still was a change
mhm,
from what we've learned. Um, it's technology is changing. The way that we interact with these vehicles is changing.
mhm,
It's important that you educate yourself on the changes. Um, Generally, when there's a software update, again, it doesn't happen that quickly. But yes, Tesla's very good at sending out in advance information about their products. So the new Model X, the battery position has changed. How to jumpstart that vehicle has changed a little bit.
right,
The points to where you connect the battery are different than where they were before. Even to the point where the electric vehicle fire that we had in our facility,
mhm,
we used a forklift to open up the frunk, I guess, to gain access to the 12-volt battery. Before there used to be a pull strap or a red little strap that's where the tow hook mounts. But what they were finding was thieves were going along pulling these and opening up the frunk and then stealing people's possessions, which was just something that happened to come along. Well, now they've changed it to when you pull off the tow hook pin in the bumper or cap, there's a red and black wire now where you have to supply battery power to that, and that will automatically
Mm.
open up the frunk. So it's minor changes over the years that have
But
taken place. So one thing that we found out, working with Transport Canada and Tesla on that particular vehicle
mhm,
fire was, I wanted to supply power to that burnt vehicle to open up the frunk, but we were unsure if it was going to put power back into the system, which we didn't want to do because obviously there was an electrical fire. At a later date, once Tesla came up, we were able to determine that that actual circuit or is separated from the rest of the vehicle. So in the future, if we needed to get access to the 12-volt battery by supplying power to that particular mechanism, I guess, it is separate from the rest of the power to the vehicle when opening up the frunk. So
mhm.
that was just an educational learning lesson, in this particular case.
They're definitely getting more complex. Now, is Tesla just as a partner, they're just sharing that information with you, or are they sharing it with everyone?
Well, that specific question was asked by us, and we asked Transport Canada if they could get clarity on that. So that information was shared with us specifically.
Right.
When it comes to the overall operational side of things, or when it comes to handling the vehicles, it's shared with everyone, and it's put in a
Yeah.
PDF format,
Yeah.
and the procedures and policies are laid out in
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, electrification is that in itself, the technology is transformational. But what a lot of people don't realize as well is the processing power that's required, especially like with the battery management systems and things like that. It's going to lead into much more advanced automation. And we're seeing that with Tesla. Tesla is light years away. We're seeing right now just with a lot of ADAS systems and things like that. So I think that's going to drastically affect the towing industry, somewhat positively, maybe somewhat negatively. I think we might see, well, if vehicles become that much more safer to drive, and even if they start driving themselves, we might start to see a lot of fewer accidents.
Mhm.
Is that something that you see, or are you concerned about? Or as long as there's a person behind the wheel, they're going to screw up and get into an accident?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when people are involved, there's always an incident. There's always a mistake that takes place. I mean, when you look at even WCB and things that happen with workers on sites for various different industries, 99% of the time it's an operator error. It's something that a person has done incorrectly and therefore has led to an accident. The automation, for sure. I mean, overall, I could see a general reduction in motor vehicle accidents, but it can be as simple as I was on my way to Alberta last summer, and we were driving a vehicle with partial automation. And in the construction zone, the road lines had changed or basically crossed over because they had put pylons up.
Hmm.
Well, the car got confused and then tried to drive us into the ditch
Yeah.
a little bit, not aggressively, but you could tell that the vehicle was struggling to make a decision. And so yeah, I think overall, if we were just, driving from point A to point B, there may be a reduction. I just don't think the technology is quite there yet. And I think, most people enjoy the act of driving. They enjoy steering and, sort of
Hmm.
just going about their daily routines, and they want to be in control. And anytime that there's an operator or a person behind the wheel, there's going to be an incident of some sort, whether
Yeah.
that's rear-ending another vehicle. And I mean, when you look at even the technology in regular vehicles, how it's advanced over the years, it warns you. It's like my GMC truck has vibrators in the seat that sort of when you get too close to something, it turns on, or a
Hmm.
red light comes on the windshield, warning you that you're getting too close.
Yeah.
Even though all of these systems are in place, there's still motor vehicle accidents still take place.
Yes.
And that's excluding when a person gets behind the wheel that's either under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or excessively speeding. So those factors, as long as people are still in play, those factors are still there.
In many
And
ways, the argument is that we won't really have ultra safe roads until we reach full level 5 autonomy. And when you're just what ADAS is the driver assist, like the vibrating seats or the
mhm,
rear view camera. That has caused so many more accidents is now because you're not checking your blind spots. You're trying to look in the
yeah, it
camera.
makes a driver lazy.
It makes a driver lazy, yeah, and in many ways, that's actually increasing accidents.
Mhm.
How does it change for roadside assistance? I imagine it it's reducing some things like, hey, I ran out of gas. Well, that's not really a problem, but it's creating some more problems. Hey, I ran out of
A
power.
charge.
I ran
Yeah.
out of charge.
Yeah, I don't know if I should say this or not, but
Go
one of
ahead.
the one of the representatives from Tesla that works at the sales center in West Vancouver ran out of a charge to get to work. So we had to pick up that vehicle and deliver them to a charging station. So whether it's gas or an electric charge, I mean, again, when people are involved, human error just happens to take over, and you ran out. I thought I could make it. I thought I had enough distance to get there, but maybe you went up that hill a little too quick and used a bit too much of that juice, right?
Right.
Um, Other than, specializing in the product and having the appropriate gear to handle a vehicle, I think you have to you become specialized in that manufactured product. I would say that with great confidence that we are able to handle a Tesla, and there's not a lot of scenarios now that can take place that we haven't had some sort of experience with.
Hmm.
Um, they're running out of gas is definitely, that will obviously be reduced. But people still lock their cars. They
Hmm.
lock their keys in their car. They still lock themselves out.
Yeah.
Or people will park their Tesla for an extended period of time and go on vacation, or travel, or whatever it is that they do. And maybe the vehicle's in an underground and it can't communicate with the servers or with Teslas, and
Right.
therefore the 12-volt batteries died over time, and that person can't gain access to their vehicle. So
Hmm.
there are still scenarios that take place, or software or something, one of the mechanical mechanisms fail. We've towed vehicles, or Tesla specifically. From Prince George down because the window wipers don't work, or in the winter time when you put your hand over the door handle doesn't come out.
Hmm.
So while there are other issues that happen with ICE vehicles, there are unique issues that happen with electric vehicles. So when providing roadside assistance, I mean, when you create a new product, it creates a new set of issues. And
Yeah.
as the product comes out and is widely used by the general public, you'll just start to see different issues take place. It's just
Yeah.
natural for these
Absolutely.
things to occur.
When do you think we're going to start to see electric tow trucks?
Aha. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, there are some sort of hybrids at this point that are out there. They're working on the new semis
Hmm.
for longevity purposes. Obviously, a semi driver, delivers freight or picks up freight from point A and takes it to point B, or delivers product, all across Canada and U.S. And it is sort of that. I guess the distance at which people want to be able to drive 1,000 kilometers, or X amount of kilometers, is the expectation of a consumer. Where the reality is most people probably don't drive more than 100 kilometers a day with
Right.
any vehicle. Most times there are exceptions. With a tow truck in particular, or other commercial vehicles, we have a lot of idle time where potentially we've arrived on a scene and it's a motor vehicle accident or some sort of situation where we require several hours to do a cleanup or recovery, or to provide assistance, to that
Hmm.
particular situation. So there's a lot of idle time there, and we're having to use what's called a PTO
Yeah.
to operate the hydraulic equipment. When we need to operate that equipment, it has to draw from some sort of power source. So, the initial issue with electric tow trucks is what kind of charge, what kind of distance can we get? when we're providing these ad hoc services on the side of the road. If a gentleman has 50% charge left, and that maybe equates to like 100 kilometers, but he is being sent to a police call or an ad hoc call that
Hmm.
comes in, maybe the fire department's called, and he arrives on scene, and that's 100 feet down the embankment. Well, that's a couple hour scenario that needs to be addressed. So um, that's where I think the problems will lie. We can't be in the middle of doing a recovery and then the truck just quits. And now we've got a truck stuck and a vehicle stuck. So just a bit more time, I think, needs to be taken
Yeah.
for manufacturers to develop how they can go about providing this product to the towing industry, specifically, I guess,
Yeah.
where we're able to use um, the trucks for extended periods of time.
Right.
Now, I know that there's been some electric hybrid, I guess, vehicles that they've been talking about, like where they're using hydrogen as a backup. So essentially, you have maybe a 200-kilometer charge, and then if you have to go past that, it dips into the hydrogen system. So there's definitely people out there working on different ways to make a commercial vehicle viable to be used in an electric way, but still provides the services that we need to.
Hmm.
So over time things change. So if you think about maybe 1 tera back in storage back in 2000 or those years, it was an entire office room with servers from wall to wall and floor to ceiling.
Hmm.
And now you can get 1 tera of storage in a little tiny
Yeah.
box essentially for one tenth the cost, right?
What do other stakeholders need to know? What do that they're not currently thinking of or talking about? I'm thinking of insurance companies. I'm talking about safety enforcement, commercial vehicle safety enforcement. What do they need to know, do you think, that they're not currently dealing with or discussing?
Oh, that's a great question, and a tough one. I mean, ultimately, um, I think when we deal with electric vehicles, we're just going to be need to be given the time. A lot of times when we arrive on scene to a situation, it's the RCMP have taken their time to do their investigation. Fire has taken their time to do their assessment, and towing operator arrives on scene, and he's expected to sort of take care of it in a couple minutes. And when you think about historically over time, an operator or a towing operator is usually by himself, whereas the fire department is a team of people. There's multiple RCMP members on scene. So I think time to allow the operator to do what's required. The operator needs to be educated in his own ways, and in meaning that the procedures that he needs to follow needs to be laid out. I think if you walked up to an RCMP member the fire captain or the gentleman that's in charge on scene, and you were to say, "Hey, through my previous training, I just need to address these 4 items first, making sure that there's no, the battery isn't impacted, that we're going to disconnect the 12-volt systems," and you basically lay it out to the person on scene, that they'll be impressed that you've taken the time to show
Hmm.
them that this is the procedures that I need to follow in order to provide the service safely. It's no different than when you're doing a recovery. Sometimes we'll have WCB show up, and there's dozens of firemen and dozens of police officers, and you write up a little basically chart on what you're going to do, the grades of chains, your equipment is rated for, all the things that is necessary to provide to do the service safely. When you show it to them and you lay it out, most of them tend to just say, "Okay, this guy knows what he's talking about," and they stand back and just allow you to do your thing. So I think we just need to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
That they need to give the operator the time it requires to provide that service. Compensation, I mean, that's always a big one. As we start to handle these vehicles and to provide these specialized services, compensation needs to increase. Historically, the towing industry is on a commission basis.
Hmm.
It's been run that way for 50 years or more. And I find that as an employer trying to retain and hire new staff,
Hmm.
uh, commission is based on the ability of an operator to move at a quick
That's right.
pace. It's sort of like piecework in a dealership, or when you're repairing a vehicle. If you can get that job done quicker, you'll make some extra incentives. And I believe that leads to cutting corners, and not allowing the operator to sort of do the job because he's concerned about making income, for providing for his family and all the rest
Sure.
that comes with it. But just to slow down, just to take your time, educate yourself, show your plan to what needs to,
Gone
you
are the
know,
days of the cheap toes.
yes, yeah, and towers need to educate themselves on how to invoice, how to bill ICBC correctly, how to not necessarily gouge by any means, or to charge for something that you haven't done, but to uh, go through with a fine-tooth comb what you're entitled to charge for the services that you
Yeah.
are offering, such as now the battery disconnect policy
Hmm.
that's come out.
Yeah.
Any electric hybrid or electric vehicle that's potentially compromised where the battery pack may be damaged, it's recommended that the 12-volt system be disconnected,
Hmm.
so that
Hmm.
the relays open or close, or
Right.
however
Right.
people.
And it's just getting insurance companies in we're fortunate in BC, we do have that recognition, but I don't think the rest of Canada does. I think some other areas do, but it's not widely a practice that's been adopted. It needs to. So I think likewise as well with that question, uh, what does the customer need to know? He might know everything about his EV and he's done his research, but probably the towing and recovery is probably something he's not really ever thought about. What do you think? Is there anything particular that they need to know?
Well, when I think of different scenarios, I mean, one example was again in West Vancouver at a tennis club. It was late night, and the lady drove her Tesla 50 feet over an embankment into a creek and hung up between some trees. And
Crazy.
yeah, I don't think we'd ask her for advice at that point in time,
Okay.
on how to recover this vehicle. But if we're just doing a jump start in a gentleman's garage or something like that, then yeah, he's probably going to be interested in
Hmm.
what you're doing. And again, it comes back to education, right? If a guy's confident, shows up, he knows exactly what he's doing, where the buttons are, what the
Should they be
process.
looking for that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as a
You know.
consumer, I mean, if I was had my $200,000 Model X breakdown, or needed assistance, and some guy showed up with holes in his sweater, and food stuck in his beard, and lights up a cigarette, well, I'm going to be a
Hmm.
little cautious, right? But if a gentleman shows up in a uniform, and potentially he has the EV sticker or the EV friendly sticker on his
Hmm.
vehicle, and he addresses me in a professional manner, I'm going to feel more confident with this particular individual, specifically if I ask him a question and he's able to sort of provide me with the answers, or to at least direct me to where I need to go. But if he's standing there scratching his head before he goes to hook up the vehicle, yeah, I'm going to have some concerns. But if the gentleman is confident and knows what he's doing, and clearly he's had some education and training, then by all means, go ahead and start your job, and we'll compensate you for whatever it costs to do the job correctly.
So Mitchell, a final question, and we ask this of all our guests. Uh, where's industry going to be in 5 or 10 years, do you think?
Well, I think with um, the way that the world is going, it's harder to find staff. It's harder to retain staff. For some reason, since COVID has happened, half the population seems to have disappeared. There's not a lot of workers out there. There's not a lot of people. I mean, I even, you recently listened to some of the John Horton on
Hmm.
TV saying if you want your house painted, well, there's less painters out there. It's
Okay.
going to take longer. It's going to cost more than it was
Hmm.
before. I think the towing industry is going to get very specialized. I think that it's going to be a rough road for the next couple of years. I think that employers are going to have to change the direction in which they're going in order to retain, maintain, and to hire the appropriate people to provide the service. I think that there's going to be some tough decisions that need to be made about compensation, and that we need to stand our ground. When I think of the towing industry in Europe, and you have to be a certified electrician to handle an EV vehicle. They've made a significant change to their industry. They're being compensated very differently than they were before,
Mm-hmm.
and we're a few years behind over here. But I think the way that we're going is we're going to become very specialized, and if you don't change with the times, um, you're just going to end up being a scrap hauler. No disrespect, but essentially you're going to be recycling vehicles as opposed to providing roadside assistance to the general client and people that are out there driving these vehicles.
Mitchell, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe or leave your comments below. If you don't have time to catch a full episode on our YouTube channels, check out EVfriendly on the Go, our audio podcast, available on Spotify or wherever you download your podcasts. Thank you.